I'm Mr. Ferreri. I'm the humanities supervisor here, and we're really happy that you could join us for, this is the 5th of 5 lecture presentations this spring. It's our 3rd annual Making a Difference celebration. Okay, some of you may be veterans of our presentations in the past. As I said, this is the 3rd annual Making a Difference presentation series that we've held here. And traditionally we bring in people from all walks of life with different experiences. Most of them have a common denominator. That common denominator is there is a first-hand account or a historian who is speaking about a particular subject, and all the subjects kind of have the common denominator of it's either a Holocaust or a genocide or some real life-altering event, usually from the 20th century. Okay? So today, what we're going to do is, and you can see the presentation on the screen here, what we're going to do today, it's a little unusual where we'll have actually 3 different people who are going to share the mic today. The first one is Dr. Tao. He holds a PhD in theoretical physics from the University of California, Berkeley, although he's retired from that now. He's currently the president of the New Jersey Alliance for Learning and Preserving the History of World War II in Asia. And that is essentially the topic for today. Talking about, and he will talk at length about Japanese atrocities in the Far East during World War II. And I know the bulk of the people sitting in the audience today are in US 2 classes, so this should be a topic that came up in conversation probably relatively recently. All right, so it streamlines well with the curriculum that you're covering right now. Our second speaker, Mr. Cheng, he's going to speak from a first-hand vantage point, talking a little bit about the infamous, what they call the rape of Nanking, all right, which is one of the incidents that's held up when people talk about Japanese atrocities in the Far East in general. So he lived through that event, and he'll talk a little bit about, through actually Dr. Tao, because he speaks exclusively Chinese. So we're going to have kind of a translation session, which will occur with that second bullet point on the screen here, with our eyewitness account. Then there's going to be a 20-minute section where we're going to show you a program called From the Words and the Eyes of Other Witnesses. So there'll be a little video presentation for you to view. And then Ms. Weotter, who's an English teacher here at the high school, and actually is the brains behind all of this operation to begin with. She puts together all of the Making a Difference lectures over the course of the year. She's going to wrap up our presentation today, talking a little bit about upstanders, and she's going to focus on case studies as it relates to this topic. So specific individuals and some of the things that they did to kind of run against the stream of this particular genocide. Okay, and then we always like to wrap up our programs with an extensive Q&A. All right, so that'll occur most certainly after the break. So hopefully you've either come to bear today with a question or a comment that you'd like to pose to one of our 3 individuals. And if you haven't, you're going to have some time over the course of this afternoon to think about something you might want to ask or share based on what's going to come out during the presentation today. And as I said, midway through, we'll break between the periods to give you kind of a bathroom break or a stretch your leg break. If there are individuals in this auditorium who must attend their period 7 class because your period 7 teacher said you must be there, then you're obviously free to go to that class. Keep in mind, however, that I excused everyone in this room for these 2 periods. So we certainly expect for you to stay unless there's some extenuating circumstance. All right? And if your teacher hasn't already told you about that circumstance, then you're free to be here for the remainder of the program. Are there any questions or comments before we start? Okay, if not, I'd like to welcome our first presenter this afternoon, Dr. Tao.
not using that because the screen is so small. And last year the screen was bigger, and people sitting in the back cannot see it. And this year we asked for a larger screen, we got a smaller screen. Therefore, we are not using PowerPoint.
It's a good thing that the principal is in the audience and he can address that in future years.
First of all, thank you for inviting us back. You were here last year, and we're looking forward to speaking with you again. More than 20 years ago, when my youngest son was in high school, he swam for the Red Band YMCA swim team, and very often the Red Band YMCA swim team will swim against the Richwood YMCA swim team. So I'm a little bit familiar with Richwood, and I've been here a few times in the past. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Nanking Massacre, which occurred in 1937 over a short period of a little bit over 6 weeks, from December 13, 1937 to the end of January 1938. It's one of the most atrocious atrocities in history, because over the 6-week period, just in the city of Nanking, which at that time had less than 1 million people, 300,000 people were killed, and over 20,000 women and girls, very young girls, including a very old woman, were raped. And that's known as the Nanking Massacre. And I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, I want to give you a little bit background information about, a little bit about the history of Japan and China from the late 19th century to the middle of the 20th century. Actually, Japan and China had 2 major wars in that period. The first is known as the First Sino-Japanese War that occurred in 1894. That war didn't last very long. Japan won the war, and in 1995 they signed a peace treaty. As a result of that peace treaty, China actually had to give a lot of things to Japan. Among other things, you had to pay 340,000 what's called taels of silver. What's that worth? 300,000 taels of silver in 1895 was equivalent to 1/3 of China's annual revenue. So it's really a huge amount of money. Can you imagine the United States giving up 1/3 of its total revenue as a result of loss of the war? And that is also equivalent to about 2.5 times the annual revenue of Japan. So it's a huge penalty. And besides that, besides the financial compensation, China also had to give up Taiwan. So Taiwan was under Japanese control from 1895 to 1945, after the end of the Second World War, when Taiwan was supposed to be returned back to China. But even today, Taiwan is not really completely returned to China, but that's another story which I'm not going to talk about today. And the second Sino-Japanese War occurred starting in 1931. It's actually a precursor of World War II. World War II very often is known in the West, it started in 1939, or in the United States it started in 1941. As far as China is concerned, the Second World War between China and Japan started in 1931. In September 18, 1931, when Japan moved into northeast China and occupied and controlled the northeastern part of China, where Manchuria is. So they controlled that part from 1931 to 1937. And then when they came into Beijing, on Peking at that time, crossed the Marco Polo Bridge, and then started a major battle between China and Japan in 1937, July 7, 1937. So very often, the second Sino-Japanese War will be considered as starting in September 18, 1931, or July 7, 1937. September 1931, when Japan first invaded China, and 1937, July 7, that's when major battle started. The Nanking Massacre, as I said earlier, started on December 13, 1937. So that's about 5 months after they invaded Beijing and started the major battles. Now, when Japan first tried to conquer the rest of China, they make a public vow saying that they will be able to defeat China and control all China in 3 weeks' time. I hope I don't get mixed up 3 weeks or 3 months. I go back and check. It turns out that it took them much longer. It took them about 3 months, from August to November 1937, just to conquer Shanghai. So that may have a bearing, which I will talk about a little later. As I mentioned earlier, during the 6-week period, after they came into Nanking, which is the capital of China at that time, in 6 weeks, they killed 300,000 people, and they raped over 20,000 women and girls. And it's just not just ordinary killing, but very atrocious killing, like cutting off their heads, using them as bayonet targets, and lock them up in a house or in a church, in a building, and then start a fire, or live burial, mass live burial. At that time, there was also a group of international people living in China, such as missionaries, such as teachers, such as diplomats, such as newspaper people, and the businessmen. So they form what is called the International Safety Zone in Nanking. And that International Safety Zone actually saved a lot of Chinese and a lot of the Chinese women and girls from being raped. Probably saved another 20,000 Chinese women and girls from being raped, besides the 20,000 they were raped. They saved about 250,000 Chinese from being murdered. And later on, Lisa is going to talk about what we call the bystanders, what these people did, what they did at that time in order to save so many people. So today we call them upstanders, not bystanders, upstanders. And these upstanders included Americans, Germans, British, Dutch, Japanese, Chinese, and others. The Nanking Massacre actually was widely documented because there were a lot of diplomats, there were a lot of media people, newspaper people, magazine people there. So they shot pictures, photographs, movies, and then wrote articles which were published in the newspapers and radio and so on. An American missionary called M.A.D, he's also an amateur photographer. Actually, he shot a lot of 16mm movies, and then he smuggled that out of China. It was shown widely in the United States, including the President of the United States. Actually, if you can go to the website and look up John M.A.D. Nanking Massacre video, and you'll find something on YouTube. We're not going to show that today, partly because of time, partly because of the atrocious nature of those movies, so we are not showing it. But you can look it up yourself if you want. China in 2014 actually declared December 13 as the National Memorial Day for Nanking Massacre victims. And the Canadian Ontario, the provincial government, is now also seriously considering to pass a motion, what they call Motion 66, to proclaim every December 13th as the Nanking Massacre commemoration day. That has not been passed yet, they are still being discussed. Now, I think there are 3 things I would like you to take away from the Nanking Massacre. One is that it's the most, if not the most, it's one of the most atrocious atrocities ever occurred in history. 6 weeks, 300,000 people killed, 20,000 women and girls raped. Second thing that I want you to take away is that it was well documented by eyewitnesses, not just Chinese eyewitnesses, but American, British, Dutch, German, Japanese, Chinese witnesses, many of them. Documented in the articles they wrote at that time, the letters they sent home, the diaries, and so on, and the movies that I mentioned. The third thing I want you to take away is that Japan, the Japanese government, as of today, still does not recognize, acknowledge the atrocity, the Nanjing Massacre atrocity. On and off, they have said various things, but taking it overall, they have never officially apologized. They deny its magnitude. They said it's a consequential war. So all these people killed is a consequential war. And furthermore, they claim it's a creation of the Chinese. Just like in the comfort movement of sex days, they claim that's a creation of the Koreans and the Chinese and other people. So those are the three things I want you to take away. It's such a serious atrocity, so many eyewitnesses documented in real time, and yet the Japanese government today still denies it. As a matter of fact, the Japanese government, starting around the 1980s, rewrote a lot of their history. So therefore, if you talk to most of the Japanese under 45 years old today, they will probably know very little or nothing about the Nanjing Massacre, because the history books haven't been written. So that's all I'm going to say as part of an introduction to the Nanjing Massacre. Now I would like to introduce Mr. Chang, who was 14 years old at that time in 1937. He's a survivor with his family and an eyewitness to what happened at that time. He's currently a resident of Middletown, which is where I came from. He has given many testimonies on his experience, and it's a very difficult experience for him to repeat. Every time he gives us a talk, he basically relives through that experience over and over again. And sometimes it will have caused him to have afterward nightmares and other bad consequences. But however, he has been willing to do that. I know personally he has given talks that I raised a dozen times in the last 10, 15 years, and many more times than other people have raised. As I said, Mr. Chan was a 14-year-old at that time. He lived in Nanjing with his family, and he'll talk about it. And he's now 95 years old or 96 years old, depending on how you count. So, one of the consequences of the Nanjing Massacre is ear was damaged in one ear. So you have to talk to him in the right ear, otherwise he cannot hear.
My English is so poor, so let Dr. Cao translate.
I don't have to translate that, but that's in English.
我的名字叫张楚业，南京人。
My name is Chu Ye Chan from Nanking.
我今天要告诉大家这个故事啊，not long ago, 80 years ago.
I want to tell you the story about what happened 80 years ago.
为什么要说这个故事呢？因为日本政府到现在他不承认有南京大屠杀这回事。
Why do I have to tell you this story? Because even up to today, Japanese government still has not acknowledged and recognized the Nanjing Massacre.
作为一个南京大屠杀的见证人，必须把这个事情告诉大家。
As a Nanjing Massacre eyewitness and survivor, it's my duty to tell the world about what happened.
没有一点点谎言，完全真实的故事。
Everything he said today is true. There's nothing that he fabricated and made up on his own.
20年前，我14岁，那个时候南京给日本军队来占领了。
80 years ago, when the Japanese invaded Nanking, he was 14.
我一家8口人，
My family has 8 people.
为了要逃避日本的飞机的轰炸，
In order to escape from the bombing from the Japanese planes,
南京边上有个长江，我们就渡过了长江，要想往内陆去逃走。
right next to Nanjing, there's a Yangtze River. And in order to escape from the bombing, they crossed the Yangtze River to try to go inland.
12月42号，日本军队已经占领南京了。
December 12, 1937, the Japanese army invaded and started occupying Nanjing.
日本军队认为你已经占领你首都，你就应该投降。
The Japanese conquered Nanjing was the capital, so they asked the Chinese to surrender.
但是中国蒋介石的军队不愿意投降，
But the Chinese government under Chiang Kai-shek at that time did not want to surrender.
他们就一步一步的向对路退。
So they gradually moved inland from Nanking, which is near the eastern border, the eastern coast.
日本人很失望，于是就凡是中国的军队一概的杀。
So the Japanese were very disappointed. Whenever they see a Chinese soldier, they will kill.
这个有证据的。
There's a lot of evidence for that.
联合国战争犯罪调查委员会的调查，
He said there's a lot of evidence, including the United Nations and an investigation on this.
日本军队在6个星期之内，
The Japanese army, within 6 weeks' time,
杀掉的中国人是34万到40万人。
according to the United Nations investigation, in this 6
这个
weeks'
是联
time,
合国调查的，绝对不是中国人造假的。
this is the United Nations report, not the Chinese report. In this,
我已经一家8口人，一家8口。
in these 6 weeks, the United Nations report said 340,000.
为了要逃避日本军队的屠杀，
In order to escape from the massacre of the
我们
Japanese
渡过
army,
了长江，逃到对岸的浦口乌衣镇。
so the family of 8 crossed the river, the Yangtze River, to go inland to Wuyi.
那时候有一批日本的工兵部队，
At that time, there was a Japanese unit, which is a construction unit, not part of the regular army, but a construction unit
有
stationed
200多人，
200 people.
他的领章是紫红色的。领章，他的领章。
They wear red clothes, I'm not sure I translated.
日本军队炮兵的领章是黄的，
The Japanese soldiers, the regular soldiers,
步
uniform is
兵部
yellow.
队是红的，
The construction people,
工兵
red.
部队是紫红色的。紫红色，
Okay, purple red.
他们要把京浦铁路打通。
Their purpose is to keep the roads, the railroads and the highways open.
可是京浦铁路经过中国军队的撤退，一步一步的把它刮断了。
But when the Chinese army move away from Nanking to go inland, so every time they move away, they destroy the roads and the railroads, and therefore there's a Japanese construction unit
工
trying
兵
to
部队
keep
从
the roads.
长江运了很多的器材，要来修补这条铁路。
So from the Yangtze River, the Japanese construction unit imported a lot of construction equipment and material.
我的父亲跟我给日本工兵部队刮去搬这个器材。
So my father, his father, and him were drafted by the Japanese army to go help to move the stuff.
日本工兵部队这个部队长在看到我们在搬器材的时候，看到一个小孩子，我是14岁，也在搬东西。
So the head of this construction team saw this little boy, 14-year-old boy, that's him.
他就叫我过去，他说：“你会不会讲英文？”我说：“我读初中而且会讲一点英文啊。”
So the Japanese construction boss asked him, "Can you come over here? Do you speak
他说：“你不要
English?"
搬东西了，你跟着我好了。”
And he said, "I speak a little bit of English." And the Japanese
他
manager
告诉
said,
我，他有一个孩子，
The Japanese manager said, "You don't have to work, come with me."
他有一个孩子也是14岁，他的皮夹里面拿了个照片给我看，跟我一样高，
He said, I have a 14-year-old son who looks like you, about your height, and took out a picture from his
他
wallet
说
and
你
showed
都
me.
跟着我好了，你不要再搬东西了。
He said, why don't you just follow me? You don't have to move stuff.
这样子我跟到他有1个月的时间，
So he followed him for about a month's time.
他吃什么给我吃什么。
So whatever he ate, he gave him, and he ate part of what they had.
他用英文教我读日文 ，Are you will 开始，
So he used English to teach him Japanese.
跟着日本军队一起，早上要向东方拜这个天皇。
So every morning, he, just like the Japanese manager, has to kneel down and pray to the Japanese emperor
要跟他学日本歌，
and learn how to sing Japanese songs.
到现在我还会唱日本国歌、日本民歌，但是我不晓得什么意思。
Even to now, he still remembers some of the songs, even though he may not know what the meanings are.
我也有兴趣的话，等一下我可以唱日本的国歌给你们的。
If you're interested later on, if you have time, you can sing a Japanese song.
这个部队长啊，他告诉你，我不能够告诉你我的名字，我也不能告诉我的番号，但是我告诉你，我是早大田大学毕业生。早大田，日本有名的大学了。
Oh, okay. The Japanese had told him that I cannot tell you my name, I cannot tell you my serial number, but I can tell you that I graduated from a famous college in Japan.
他的意思告诉我，我是大学生。
So what he meant is that he's a graduate of college.
所以你跟着我，我可以教你。
So if you follow me, I can teach you certain things.
到12月31号这一天，
To December 31st, certain things happened.
日皇赐下来御酒，
The Japanese emperor had a direct
酒了，御酒，皇帝赐下来的御酒，哎，酒，喂，
Okay. The Japanese emperor, as part of the New Year celebration, sent them some wine, for the Japanese troops.
日本兵喝醉了以后啊，就乱来了。
So after they got drunk from the wine, then they started doing various things.
那个时候我们镇上的人差不多都逃光了，
So at that time, a lot of Chinese already escaped from that area.
我们一家没办法，还没有走。
But their family of 8 did not have the opportunity to escape them. One of the reasons which he did not mention is that a lot of the boats and trains were already full, so they were not able to, unless you can afford to buy very expensive tickets, which they were not able to.
我爸爸呢，赶快叫我，你赶快请部队长到我们家里来。
So his father told him, why don't you go and get the Japanese manager to come, because a lot of bad things are going to happen.
这个部长已经带着几个兵啊，在我家里面啊做坏事了。
At that time, a group of Japanese were already in their house doing bad things.
跟我把部队长请到家里去，一看糟糕了。
And after he went to get the manager and come to his house, it was already too late, and this is what they discovered.
我的太祖母已经是死在床上，
His great-grandmother, not grandmother, his great-grandmother already died, was already raped and
床上
killed,
都是血。
and the bed is full of blood.
我的母亲和妹妹都给日本人强奸了。
His mother and his younger sister were also raped by the Japanese.
我看到我就很生气了，我就骂这个部长，说你八开！
So he was very upset, so he yelled out a cuss word in Japanese at
这
the
部长
Japanese
来
people.
一打，结果一个耳光把我打在地上。
So the Japanese soldier came and hit him on the head and knocked him to the
所
ground.
以现在我的耳朵不好，
So
耳朵不听不
even
到。
up to now, his left ear cannot hear. So when you speak to him, try to talk.
部队长赶快叫他们回去。部队长叫他们士兵赶快回去。
So the head soldier came and then asked these soldiers to leave.
他跟我爸爸跟我说，你们要赶快走。
And then he also told him and his father,
How
you
many
guys
people were there?
better leave too, because otherwise they'll come back and kill you.
部队长很好，马上叫他副官找了一个渡轮车，
So the Japanese manager found a wheelbarrow.
把我们母亲妹妹放到，我在前面拉绳子，爸爸在后面，我们赶快要往乡下逃走。
So put the mother and his daughter, his sister on the wheelbarrow, and then he pulled from the front, his father pushed from the back, and the whole family escaped. Great grandmother, of course, was
一
already
直
there.
等到过了阴历年以后，南京秩序恢复了，我们才能够回南京去。
So it was after the new year, later on, several weeks later, that they were able to go back to Nanjing.
所以这个8年时间，我们就回在南京啊，从一无所有开始，慢慢的，我做了师范学校以后，开始做小学老师，做小学校长，
So after the Nanjing massacre, after the war, later on, he went back to school and became a teacher.
所以后来共产
要不要讲你去找实体的？要不要讲你去找实体？你讲。Okay. Because I heard his story many, many times. So sometimes he will repeat certain things, sometimes he will not repeat certain things. I just reminded him that one of the things he did after the incident is that there were a lot of corpses along the streets of Nanking. And one of the things that he did was that he has a very sensitive nose and can detect dead bodies versus dead animals. So there were a funeral, not a funeral, there's a Red Cross team looking for dead bodies to recover, to move it away. And so he actually helped them. And every time he discovered a dead body, they would pay him, I think, 10 cents or something like that. So he probably helped out to discover hundreds of dead bodies. That's one of the things that he mentioned in the past, but not today.
49年，我们因为国共内战了，我们就到了台湾。
So after the end of the war, and his family moved to Taiwan.
然后我们移民到美国来。
And then later on, they immigrated to the United States.
能够在美国这30多年，就是一个非常大的享受。
In the last 30 plus years in the United States, has been a pretty good situation.
我能够在这里带大了3个孙子，他们现在都已经成家立业了，那我的责任也尽到了，所以我今天就是向各位表示我的感恩。
8个孩子去了，8个孩子去了
3个孩子，3个孙子，能够
9个孙子。
对。
So now he has 3 children, 3 sons, daughters, and 9 grandchildren. So he would like to take this opportunity also to thank the United States.
历史不能够造假。
History cannot be.
我们必须要记得从前的历史，才能够知道我们未来怎么发展。
We cannot twist history around. We should recognize what history and then learn from history so that we can go forward.
我对日本人一点不怀恨。
He has no hate for the Japanese people.
因为日本人在战争期间也同样的受苦。
Because during the Second World War, the Japanese people also were sufferers.
战争非常可怕。
The war is very horrible.
我们就希望不要再有战争。
We hope there's no more war.
日本人为了战争，他自己军队也非常的受罪，非常辛苦。
Because the war, the Japanese people within Japan also suffer a lot.
所以，我到美国来以后，我们就一直要反对战争。
So after he came to the United States, he's against war.
我到琉球大学去讲南京大屠杀的历史。
In the 1990s, he actually went to Okinawa. He was invited to go to Okinawa and talk about the Nanjing massacre.
琉球说日本人把琉球改成冲绳，我们不承认。
The Okinawa people said Japan actually took over Okinawa.
琉球大学他说我们琉球就是琉球，绝对不改冲绳。
And the Okinawa people said Okinawa is not part of Japan.
所以琉球说你所唱的歌是北海道的民歌。对。
So when he sang the song for the Okinawa people, the song that he learned from the Japanese manager, he said that's a Japanese song setting Japanese soldiers off the wall.
希望我们在美国的我们的同胞都能够记得历史是不能够改的。
So I hope everyone, including Americans, to recognize that history cannot be distorted.
南京大屠杀这件事情，无论日本怎么交代，改不了。
In spite of what the Japanese government says, the truth about the Nanjing massacre cannot be distorted, cannot be wiped out.
我唱一个日本的国歌给大家听啊，我不懂它什么意思，但是我们会唱啊。君がよ啊，只有你呀，只有你咋打的，一起喽，你往后头哪里的，可开喽，不是妈的，这是日本国歌啊，我唱的不好哎。
It's one of the Japanese songs he learned. He does not know what the meaning is. He
好，谢谢大
he
家。
also said he does not sing alone. He said, thank you very much. I just want to add something I forgot to mention, and that is, why did the Japanese people, why did the Japanese soldiers do such horrible things? There could be many reasons, but I would like to offer three. One is what I said earlier, that they thought they can conquer all China in 3 weeks. It could be 3 months, I have to go back and check. And it took them 3 months just to conquer Shanghai. So in that sense, they were very upset. The second reason is that the Japanese soldiers, the Japanese government did not provide food for the Japanese soldiers. So they thought, there are so many Chinese, there's not going to be enough food. So why don't we kill off a lot of the Chinese? That way they will have some food. The third reason is probably the most important reason, is that is the Japanese government, especially the Japanese government, at that time thought that the Chinese and other Asians were inferior people, at least inferior to the Japanese. And so they look upon them as like lower level animals. So you kill lower level animals without much consequence. And so those are some of the major reasons to explain why they would do such a thing. So that's all I'm going to talk about as far as the overview and also Mr. Cherry's testimony. I would like now to I don't have slides to show you. I want you to hear the testimonies from other eyewitnesses besides Mr. Chen. And I'm just going to play their testimony. These are not testimonies from the original voices because they're all dead. These are testimonies from the voices of other people, including Lisa, and based on what they wrote at that time. Okay, so I'm going to play the testimonies about 10 people. The first one is Dr. Robert Wilson. He's an American surgeon. He was the only surgeon remaining in Nanking at that time. The second one is Minnie Voltrin. She's also an American missionary and also a school teacher. She's actually the headmaster of Jilin College, a women's college in Nanking. And the third one is Chen Shuifan, who is actually a Chinese head assistant to University. And the fourth one is John Rabi, who's a German engineer. He's actually head of the International Safety Zone. He is also a Nazi, so sometimes people say that he's a good Nazi. And then the fifth and sixth one are Japanese soldiers. There were a lot of Japanese soldiers, which subsequently was interviewed by a Japanese called Tamaki Matsuoka, who actually has visited New Jersey and given talks many times before. And she has interviewed over 250 former Japanese soldiers who were stationed in Nanking and over 300 Chinese survivors, and tried to correlate their stories. What happened, when did it happen, where did it happen, and so on. And the stories were correlated very well. She spent 30 years of her adult life using her own money to try to find out what happened in Nanking Massacre. So two of these Japanese soldiers were among the people she interviewed. Actually, three of them. And then there's another Chinese, Yang Mingqian. And then there's two other Chinese, and Mr. Chen, which I'm not going to mention, you've already heard his testimony. And then the last one is the American John McGee, which I mentioned earlier, who shot 16mm movies.
December 18th, 1937. Today marks the 6th day of modern Dante's Inferno, written in huge letters with blood and rape. Murder by the wholesale and rape by the thousands of cases. There seems to be no stop to the ferocity, lust, and atavism of the brutes. December 15th, 1937. The slaughter of civilians is appalling. I could go on for pages telling of cases of rape and brutality almost beyond belief. January 3rd, 1937. She was one of the 5 women whom the Japanese soldiers had taken to one of their medical units, to wash their clothes by day, to be raped by night. 2 of them were forced to satisfy from 15 to 20 men, and the prettiest one as many as 40 each night. This one who came to us had been called off by 3 soldiers into an isolated place where they attempted to cut off her head. The muscles of the neck had been cut, but they failed to sever the spinal cord. She feigned death, but dragged herself to the hospital, another of the many to bear witness to the brutality of the soldiers. December 19th, 1937. All the food is being stolen from the poor people, and they are in a state of terror-stricken, hysterical panic. When will it stop? December 30th, 1937. The only consolation is that it can't be worse. They can't kill as many people as there aren't any more to kill.
Okay, that's Robert Wilson, an American surgeon.
December 19, 1937. Again this morning, wild-eyed women and girls came screaming in at the gate. The night had been one of horror. Many kneeled and implored to be taken in, and we let them in, though we do not know where they will sleep tonight. Later, the morning was spent going from one end of the campus to the other, trying to get one group of soldiers after another one. Went up to South Hill, 3 times I think, then to the back campus, and then was frantically called to the old faculty house, where I was told 2 soldiers had gone upstairs. There, in room 538, I found one standing at the door, and the other one inside, already raping a poor girl. December 23rd, 1937. Last night, from 60 to 100 men, mostly young, were taken in trucks to the little valley south of the Jinling Temple, shot by machine gun fire, later put into a house and the whole house set on fire. I have been suspecting that many of the fires we see at night are to cover up either looting or killing. Most residences have been looted unless a foreigner is present in them, and that has been impossible when people are so busy. It's raining today. All people who have been sleeping on verandas will have to squeeze inside somehow. The good weather of past weeks has been a great blessing.
I forgot to mention that's Minnie Wilson, the headmaster of Jilin College, Women's College in Nanking. And that's right in the middle of the international zone. That campus saved tens of thousands of Chinese, and especially Chinese women and girls from being raped. How many of you recognize that voice? You don't recognize that voice? One person? That's Lisa's voice. Okay. This is also Minnie Wilson continual.
December 21st, 1937. We have absolutely no contact with the outside world, know nothing of what is happening, and can send out no messages. While watching at the gate tonight, the gate man said that each day seemed like a year, and life had lost all meaning, which is true. And the sad thing is, we see no future. The once energetic, hopeful capital is now almost an empty shell. Pitiful, heartrending. December 22nd, 1937. The Japanese embassy wanted the electric light plant repaired so that the lights could be turned on. Mr. Ravi, therefore, got 50 employees together and took them down to the plant. This afternoon, 43 were shot by soldiers saying they were the employees of the Chinese government. December 18, 1937. The only thing that had saved Chinese people from utter destruction was the fact that there were a handful of foreigners in Nanking. What would it be like if there were no check on this terrible devastation and cruelty?
I mentioned about John Rabi, that's the German engineer from Siemens, who was also the head of the International Safety Zone. He was also head of the engineering department to manage and maintain the lights and so on in Nanking. So that's what he mentioned. And then he said 30 or 40 people dead, and most of them were shot. Even though they're Germans. Well, some of them are German, some of them are Chinese. This is Miss Chen, T-S-E-N, Miss Chen, who's a chief assistant to Minnie Wilson. She's also a registered nurse.
December 13, 1937. Tonight, many refugees came to the college as the Japanese soldiers drove them out of their own homes because the soldiers wanted to sleep there. Most of these refugees came empty-handed. The soldiers had taken their bedding. They were scared to death. This happened in the safety zone. People presumed that the Japanese soldiers would not enter into the safety zone. I feel so sad. Nanking has not had peace since 4 months ago and fell only after 3 days fighting. It is really pathetic. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. Today, 2 more poor babies were born. Their mothers are suffering too, and all sleep on the ground. December 14, 1937. Many more refugees came to the college today. All fled to here from the safety zone because the Japanese soldiers came to their homes to demand money and to rape. Quite a few people were bayoneted to death on the streets. The situation in the safety zone is terrible like this, and it is even worse outside the zone. Nobody dares to go out of the safety zone. Most of the dead were young men. Jinling has 4,000 or 5,000 refugees. December 17, 1937. This kind of slavery life is very difficult to endure. If I were not struggling for the survival of our Chinese race, I would commit suicide. Each night outside, every place is burning. A lot of people in Sagwan died. When thinking about the Chinese people, I cannot help but feel heartbroken.
The same person continue the testimony.
January 3rd, 1938. The roads around Sagwan were impassable, covered with dead bodies. People had to walk over the bodies. January 4th, 1938. The Japanese soldiers go to private residences to sleep, dragging husbands out. If husbands refuse to leave, they are shot to death. If wives refuse to obey the Japanese soldiers' sexual demands, they are shot too.
The next one is John Rabi, the head of the International Safety School, a German engineer from Siemens. Okay.
We're going to take a 5-minute break. All right.
I know the large majority of you have just finished or recently completed your study of the World War II era. The dates that they're throwing around talked about how this was a 6-week window in 1937. So the US2 students in the audience, you realize World War II has not started yet, right? World War II officially starts with the German invasion of Poland in September of 1939, September 1st of 1939. So this incident, these series of incidents occur a full 2 years before World War II breaks out in Europe, and then eventually extends to the Pacific with the Japanese invasion of several areas in Southeast Asia. And then our part of the story, which you're probably most familiar with, is when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 41, right? So that's a full 4 years after the incidents that they're talking about. Coincidentally, this series of events, known as the Rape of Nanking, they just, it's the 80th anniversary of it this past winter, right? December of 2017, that's the 80th anniversary. Okay, just for the benefit of the new arriving group, for Mr. Thurlow's group in the back there. So for the first hour, we have 2 honored guests today. Dr. Tao, he just spoke briefly on Japanese atrocities in the Far East for a bit. And then Mr. Chang, the fellow in the front row here, he is a living eyewitness to the incidents that occurred in the winter of 1937 in China. So if you do the math, he was a 14-year-old in 1937. So he's 95 right now. So you don't often see, obviously, live testimony from someone in the 21st century about something that occurred 80 years ago. So it's kind of a valuable experience. What we're going to do for the second hour here, we're going to hear a little bit more for the group that was here in the first hour. We were listening to some other testimony that was taken from eyewitnesses through journals or diaries by secondhand people who are reading those testimonies, just to get a little more well-rounded picture of what occurred in Nanking in 1937. And then Ms. Weotter is going to talk a little bit about the idea of the upstander. Oftentimes when we have these conversations, we talk about the bystanders, right? The people that didn't really do anything about an atrocity that they knew about. We always talk about the perpetrators. In World War II, you're talking about the Japanese under Tojo, or you're talking about the Italians under Mussolini, or the Germans under Hitler. Right? Those are the perpetrators. But oftentimes, you know, and then obviously you hear about the victims. But very seldomly do you hear about those special people who kind of go against the grain and risk their own lives to try to help. Okay, so you're going to hear a little of that testimony and a conversation that Ms. Weotter is going to have with you. And then, as we mentioned in the last segment, we're going to open it up to Q&A. And I welcome you to ask questions of any of the 3 people that are going to speak today. So that's the protocol. Okay.
The next one is going to be John. Is this on? Can you hear me? Or do I have to change the microphone? Can you hear me? No? Yeah? Okay. The next one is John Rabi. He's the German head of the International Safety, so also a German engineer from Siemens.
From John Rabi's diary, a German engineer and head of the International Safety Zone in Nanking during the Nanking Massacre, wrote in his letters, December 28, 1937. Fires are still being set everywhere, over and over. You feel like a seriously ill patient fearfully watching the hour hand inch forward. All the refugees are afraid of the new year because they expect the Japanese soldiers to get drunk and then commit more atrocities. December 28, 1937. The reports we're hearing from all sides today are so hair-raising that I can hardly bring myself to put them to paper. Before registration began at some of the schools where refugees are camped out, the Japanese first demanded that any former Chinese soldiers in the crowd step forward voluntarily. They were given promises of protection. They were merely to be put into labor crews. At that, a good number of refugees stepped forward. In one case, about 50 people. They were let off at once. As we learned from one of the survivors, they were taken to a vacant house, robbed of all valuables and clothes, and when completely naked, tied up together in groups of 5. Then, the Japanese built a large bonfire in the courtyard, led the groups out one by one, bayoneted the men, and tossed them, still alive, on the fire. 10 of these men were able to slip free of their ropes, leap over the courtyard wall, and vanish into the crowd, who gladly found clothes for them. December 17, 1937. 2 Japanese soldiers have climbed over the garden wall and are about to break into our house. When I appeared, they give the excuse that they saw 2 Chinese soldiers climb over the wall. When I showed them my party badge, they returned the same way. In one of the houses in the narrow street behind my garden wall, a woman was raped and then wounded in the neck with a bayonet. I managed to get an ambulance so we can take her to Kailua Hospital. Last night, up to 1,000 women and girls are said to have been raped. About 100 girls at Jinling Girls College alone. You hear nothing but rape. If husbands or brothers intervene, they're shot. What you hear and see on all sides is this brutality and bestiality of the Japanese soldiers. December 14th, 1937. It is not until we toured the city that we learned the extent of destruction. We came across corpses every 100 to 200 yards. The bodies of civilians that I examined had bullet holes in their backs. These people had been presumably fleeing and were shot from behind. The Japanese marched through the city in groups of 10 to 20 soldiers and looted the shops. I watched with my own eyes as they looted the cafe of our German baker, Eric Heisling. Temple's Hotel was broken into as well, as almost every shop on Zhongshan and Taiping Road. December 25th, 1937. And I can lie down to rest, though still in my boots and spurs, as always, for I have to be ready to throw out intruders at a moment's notice. December 26th, 1937. It's getting more and more difficult to feed the 200,000 people in our zone. After February 28th, 1938, in a report to Hitler, they would continue by raping the women and girls and killing anything and anyone that offered any resistance, attempted to run away, or simply happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. There were girls under the age of 8 and women over the age of 70 who were raped and then, in the most brutal way possible, knocked down and beaten up. We found corpses of women on beer glasses and others who had been lanced by bamboo shoots. I saw the victims with my own eyes. I talked to some of them right before their deaths and had their bodies brought to the morgue at the Kailua Hospital so that I could personally be convinced that all these reports had touched on the truth.
The next 3 are Japanese soldiers which were interviewed by Tamaki Matsuoka. These were soldiers who were stationed in Nanking at that time.
The day that Nanjing fell, there were mountains of dead bodies piled up outside the walls of the city. I felt something soft beneath my feet. Lighting a match to see what I was stepping on, I realized that the entire surface under my feet was like a carpet of dead bodies. There were dead bodies everywhere. I don't know which unit was responsible, but they had all been killed by bayonets. There were women and children, but no soldiers.
They, the Chinese prisoners, were all made to run along the pier, and they were all shot and killed from behind. But we told each other, what an awful thing we are doing. The Chinese that had been shot jumped and fell into the river, so there was no need to clean up afterwards either. The river would carry them away.
So those are two soldiers. The next one is the third one. Next two.
We dragged all of them Chinese prisoners out of the freight train hangar and made them sit down facing the shore. They sat down in knee-deep mud. When the command was given, they were sprayed with bullets at point-blank range from machine guns that had been hidden in nearby trenches. They fell down one by one like dominoes. Blood-soaked, smoking pieces of flesh and clothing flew up into the air. Light machine guns that had been set up on the wharf took care of the several dozens or so of them who had jumped into the river. The muddy waters were soaked red with blood. What a miserable scene. Was such a righteous thing ever be seen again in this world?
At Xiaoguan, the district in Nanking that is next to the Yangtze River, I saw a large number of bodies floating on the Yangtze River. Corpses were continuously being tossed into the river until the water was full of them. While transporting the corpses, we noticed that there were so many corpses on the road that automobiles could not drive through. Basically, it was a road made of dead bodies.
Chinese victim testimony.
Yang Mingzhen, female, born February 1930. The next day was the 15th. Japanese soldiers came back again that afternoon while my mother and I were lying on the kitchen floor. My father was so weak that he was just lying there. A Japanese soldier came up to my father, opened his eyes with his fingers, and thrust a knife into his mouth. My father was conscious, but unable to move. Seeing my father in this state, the Japanese soldier cried out in Chinese, "Si le, si le, you're dead, you're dead." Then he came up to my mother and pulled her trousers down. As he wiped the soot from my mother's face, she bit his hand. Livid, the Japanese soldier hit my mother's face again and again, and then raped her. After that, he started taunting her, twisting the barrel of his gun around the inside of her vagina. Sobbing, my mother pleaded with him again and again to stop. There was lots of blood flowing from the lower part of my mother's body. The other Japanese soldier pulled my trousers down and started taunting me, prying open my still firm vagina with his fingers. At any rate, they were prepubescent genitals, the genitals of a 6 or 7-year-old. I screamed out in pain. Disregarding my screams, the Japanese soldier forcibly raped me. He was a beast. The two of them took turns raping my mother and I. Blood flowed in torrents, and I was so painful that I couldn't even walk afterwards. As my mother had collapsed, I took care of my own wounds, pressing a cloth against my genitals. In addition to the damage I suffered personally, I also witnessed many other Chinese being killed by Japanese soldiers. There were dead bodies all over town. Japanese soldiers would rape any woman they caught sight of, kill any man they found. What on earth makes them think they can say that the Nanking Massacre never happened?
One morning, filled with curiosity, I ventured outside with my older brother and 4 other children. There were lots of dead bodies lying around Yijiang Gate. Even the area inside the gate itself was piled high with bodies. A mass grave had been dug near the gate and bodies thrown in willy-nilly. It was a truly horrific sight, with bodies piled up all the way to the grass along the edges of the hole. Inside the gate, bodies were piled up to a height of more than 1 meter, and there were more bodies at Zhongshan Wharf. It was so terrifying that I couldn't look at the bodies.
The next one is Mr. Chan. I was going to skip that, but since Teacher Lee was not here, so I'm going to play.
Zhang Chuoye, a 14-year-old boy at the time of the Nanking Massacre, who now resides in Middletown, New Jersey. That night, 5 Japanese soldiers charged into our house, forced my father and me out, and then raped my mother, my 80-year-old great-grandmother, and my 11-year-old sister. By the time I got back into the house, my great-grandmother had already died and was lying in a pool of blood from the violent abuse and unbearable suffering. Later, crossing the Yangtze River on a small boat back to Nanking, we saw many dead bodies floated like balloons floating around us, and the smell of the corpses from the upstream Baguato Island made me feel like puking. These bodies were often the result of killing practices and competitions among the Japanese troops, and many of the bodies were without their heads, as decapitation was one of the Japanese' favorite execution methods. The walls of the city moat were covered with blood drops and bullet holes. In spite of the atrocities committed by the Japanese soldiers against my family, I am not seeking any revenge and do not hold any animosity against the Japanese people. The fact that I have become a Christian has helped me to forgive the Japanese. I tell my 3 children and 9 grandchildren that they must not hate, but they must never forget this part of history. I don't want this kind of things to happen again to anyone else in the future.
The last one is the American missionary, Reverend John McKee.
December 17th, 1937. The horrors of the last week is beyond anything I had ever experienced. I never dreamed of the Japanese soldiers as such savages. It has been a week of murder and rape, worse than I can imagine. But it has happened for a long time. They not only killed every person they can find, but also vast number of ordinary citizens of all ages. Many of them were shot down like the hunting of rabbits in the streets. There are dead bodies all over the city. I myself saw hundreds of dead bodies.
That's the end of this part, and I now turn to Lisa.
travel all through China and South Korea. And so every summer, not every summer, summers I go to different countries. And so I was fortunate to go here. So having said that, I often talk about, as Mark said, where he said the upstanders. But these topics are extraordinarily depressing. Okay. Whether it's Rwanda, or Rwandans, or the Holocaust, or Dan King. Don't try to imagine being there because you cannot ever imagine what these people went through. Okay? But you always have to remember, Mr. Chang is here, and a lot of people are living because of upstanders. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of quickly because of time and because Dr. Chow talked a lot about what I was going to say, so it'll be repetitive. There's nothing wrong with that. So I had done a longer version of this presentation somewhere else, so I shortened it here. So what is an upstander? Mr. Ferrari had already mentioned, we often talk about the bystander, or the victim, or the perpetrator. But there's always lights in the darkness. I studied at Yad Vashem in Israel a couple years ago, and that's where we were taught the term lights in the darkness. There's always lights in the darkness. There's always the good guy. And so what's an upstander? Speaks out, does the right thing, and makes decisions that help create positive change. Positive change, right? We just learned about atrocities that we can't even get our heads around. So imagine being in that town, let's say, right? If you want to do something that's right. They make a conscious choice to step in. It's not by accident, they purposely do it. And their acts are sometimes very big. So saving people or maybe just giving someone a piece of food that will also save them. Notice what's not up there. The people are not rich. The people are not famous. They're not a certain age. Anyone can be an upstander. Throughout all these atrocities, teenagers were upstanders. Kids can be upstanders. Adults can be upstanders. Notice what's not up there, everybody, okay? No age limit. You don't have to be somebody of wealth. You don't have to be famous. Anybody. So these have all been mentioned already. Okay? First, John M.A.D, Lee Lodgman, and John Rash. So they should be all familiar with you. Familiar to you at this point. So I'm going to show you some images more because I think it's important to put a face to this. Notice what these people look like. Once again, they're not rich and they're not famous. They're just your everyday person. Okay? So there he is on the left, and he's there again on the right. So he was the American. He's an American. He was born in Pennsylvania, so not very far from us. He was a minister, and he goes over there as a minister. So he wasn't, no one was prepared for what was going to happen. Okay? Dr. Tao talked about the fact that they took film. They all took diaries. Those are all those excerpts, diaries and letters. Okay? This is a tribunal. It's a military tribunal at the end, just like in the Holocaust, right? They have these big trials. John M.A.D, a minister from Pennsylvania, testified. His films were so important. Think about it. When you have a journal or you write a letter, do you ever expect it to end up in a court? Or proving something? To us, it's probably a little hard to get that Japan doesn't recognize this, or Turkey doesn't recognize the Armenian genocide. And there's all this testimony and all this evidence. So that's the good part. So you never know what's going to happen. He did not take the film with the intent of this happening. So I know we've had testimony, but I have one excerpt from each. Okay. So this is a letter to his wife. He gets married. He gets married to a missionary, and they have some kids. Okay. The horror of the last week is beyond anything I have ever experienced. I never dreamed that the Japanese soldiers were such savages. It has been a week of murder and rape. Worse, I imagine, than has happened for a very long into this university. So we actually saw the gates that they went through, and there's statues there. So on the right, I have a picture of children, refugees. Okay? Remember, these are everyday people like you and I. They didn't do anything wrong. When Dr. House talks about 300,000 people, they're not military people. They're everyday people. 20,000 women getting raped. For me personally, it's a very difficult topic, the rape of Nanking. I was talking to students yesterday, and I called the Nanking Massacre. But the rape of Nanking is just beyond comprehension for me anyways. For some reason, that just more trouble. It is. There's rapes and all atrocities, but the number of women that were raped and held as sex slaves, if you heard the numbers from some of the testimonies, your stomach should have turned. 20 to 40 men a night. And I have been where they were. The rooms are very small, and there was lists, and there was charges for whatever the military man wanted. They reused condoms. I don't want to talk about this, but I want you to understand how horrific the situation was. So she's there at the college, and as Dr. Tubbs already said, they create a safety belt in the college, and she's responsible for saving thousands of women. She's a teacher. She didn't go there. Last call from the embassy today. You have to choose one of the three alternatives and sign your names. 1, go now. 2, expect to go later. 3, under no conditions leaving. I signed number 3. Although my Chinese colleagues felt I was endangering them, surely I would go. A year to the day after she leaves Nanking and comes back home, she committed suicide. She could not handle what she did. John Robbie, as already mentioned. The house on the left is his home, which I was fortunate enough to go there. You should see it. He's on the right. Notice this picture. It shows us on purpose. What's in the left-hand corner? Swastika, not flag. Wait a minute, something doesn't fit here. China, why is there not a flag? Okay. So Dr. Tower already mentioned that John Robbie saves all these people. He works for Siemens. He's a salesperson. He worked there for almost 30 years. He's from Germany. He's a card-carrying Nazi. He's in charge of the Nazi Berlin campaign. He's a salesman working at Siemens. What does he do in his attempts to save people? He puts the Nazi flag out, or the German flag out, so that they won't get bombed. He puts it out in his yard so that when there's bombings, the people will be saved. So if you think about what that flag normally represents, in this situation it represents something totally different. It represents safety. So card-carrying Nazi risks his own life to save China. Almost all the houses of the German military advisors have been looted by Japanese soldiers. No Chinese even dare set foot outside his house. And the gates to my garden
Okay, we want to give an opportunity for the audience to ask any questions that you might have, and it could be to any of the three speakers that we've had this afternoon. And the way we can do this, if you have a question, you can just raise your hand, and I'll hand you the microphone, and then I'd ask you just to stand up and very clearly say your first name and clearly ask your question. Do I have any first takers here?
First person to ask a question gets a candy bar, which I don't have.
Just have him stand. Kobe. Yeah.
It's Julio, and I have a question for, I guess you guys can say the subject. In your study of this event, do you think a soldier is able to develop sophisticated tendencies for qualities in the army, or, and if so, to what extent can it grow? Do you see, does seeing / committing violent crimes drive them to commit more violent stuff? Were they could they have been good at some point and then develop tendencies from their environment?
Your question is, what makes a soldier do that, and when they see other people do it, does that make them want to do it? Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are various answers to that question. At that time, it was not the individual soldiers' mandate, it was also the Japanese Army's mandate. There's a very famous quotation, it said, kill all, 3 alls. To kill all, to burn all, to rape all, or something like that. So there was sort of a mandate from the Japanese, directly from the Japanese government. Even though they are military police, but very often they look the other way. So I think, I will not say that Japanese soldiers were evil, but however, under those circumstances, when the Japanese government has this 3-all policy, and everybody see everybody is doing it, so they also do it. When Tamaki Machuoka interviewed these 250 former Japanese soldiers, almost all of them whom she interviewed admitted that what they did was wrong, but they never apologized. At least not in Tamaki Machuoka's interview. So looking back, I knew that what they did was evil, was wrong, but that they still did not apologize. So I don't know, I don't think I have a general answer to your question. Some of them will definitely think that it was wrong, it was evil, and they wish they had not done it. And some of them probably still believe that the Chinese was an inferior people. And some of them that the Japanese emperor is not only an emperor, he's a god. That was a directive of the emperor. In spite of what sometimes the public media says, Japanese Emperor Hirohito was a hands-on emperor. He knew everything. He approved all the major decisions. It's not that it was a hands-off, and it happened and he did not know that. So the Japanese, they look at the Japanese emperor as a god. So that was a mandate from God. So they did it. Okay. Next question.
My name is Brandon. Just wanted to ask your opinion on what do you think it would take to get the Japanese government to that all specific historical event as possible?
Okay. The question is, what do I think will take the Japanese government to admit I hate to say this, but I'm going to say it. The American government has a lot to do with what the Japanese position is. From the end of the Second World War, there's Lisa mentioned there's a Japanese Tokyo trial. There's some unit called Unit 731, which is the unit in charge of biological chemical weapons in China. And a lot of them were used surgery on people without anesthesia. And some of them were done by American prisoners of war. But the Tokyo trial, none of the people involved in the 731 was ever tried. Why? Because there's a secret agreement, a secret at that time, no longer secret. There's a secret agreement between the Japanese government and the American government that none of those criminals will be tried if the Japanese government would hand over the information they have on volatile chemical weapons. Japan was the world's leader in chemical volatile weapons in the Second World War. So as part of that agreement, they were never tried. And actually some of them came over to the United States and worked in Maryland for the United States government. That's one instance. There are a lot of other instances which I don't have time to go into. There are a lot of cases after the Second World War, up to today. Our American government has a large role. Because our American government decision not to prosecute Emperor Hirohito, even though he was a hands-on person. And so, if the emperor did not do anything wrong, he was not prosecuted. Why would I, as a Japanese person or Japanese soldier, admit that I did something wrong? So I don't have time to elaborate. In my opinion, there are a lot of things that our American government has done in the last 70 years, which caused Japan not to admit in a crime. And that's a very, very deep issue which I don't have time to discuss. That's my personal opinion. Other people may have different opinions.
I just want to add one more thing. So just so you know, this topic is alive. This topic is alive and well. As part of my trip, there is a weekly protest in South Korea in front of the Japanese embassy every single week. So this topic is alive and well in terms of the fact that Japan will not own up to it. So don't think that this is history. It's history, but it's current events. It's people's lives. It's not something out of a book, everybody. It's people's lives that were ruined. Okay? But this topic is a current event topic. It is not historical in terms of what's happening.
Let me give you another example. I don't know whether you're familiar with the 1951 San Francisco Peace Treaty, which is the official peace treaty ending the war with Japan. Which country suffered the most from Japan during the Second World War? China. China, whether it's the Republic of China or People's Republic of China, was not invited to the 1951 peace treaty. The United States was the chief person in charge. Why? Because the United States didn't want China to be involved because at that time it was the communists and so on. So one of the things from the San Francisco Peace Treaty is that Japan should give back Taiwan, should give up Taiwan. Remember Taiwan, as I said, is the first Sino-Japanese war. China gave Taiwan to Japan. So the San Francisco Peace Treaty only says Japan should give up Taiwan. It doesn't say Japan should give up Taiwan back to China. In the Potsdam Declaration, the Cairo Declaration, at the end of the Second World War, surrender by Japan, all these documents said Japan should not only give up Taiwan, it should return to China. So that's another instance. That's why up to now, in the 1950s, people like Dulles, Secretary Dulles at that time said, the status of China is still undetermined, because according to the San Francisco Peace Treaty. So there are many incidents like that, which I don't have time to discuss. Next question. Yes.
And one over here.
Hi, I'm Noah. Do you think if Japan ever acknowledged the massacre, what do you think would be a proper apology, or do you think a proper apology is even possible?
Oh, well, I don't know if it's impossible. I think a proper apology is warranted. A public apology would say, yes, those things did happen, and we apologize. We think it's wrong. It should not have happened, and we would like to go on from there and build the peace between. Unless that happens, I don't think there'll be a true friendship between the Chinese people and the Japanese people, and true peaceful relationship between Japan and China. So I think that's very important. But Very often you will hear people say, how many times does Japan have to apologize? The key answer is that almost every time they apologize something, a few days later, the same organization, the same person will say something which negated the apology. And the Japanese government, the Japanese parliament, and so on, have never officially declared an apology. Yes. How did Taiwan play a role during the massacre? Taiwan, as far as I know, did not play much of a role during the massacre. However, at the end of the Second World War, there was a lot of massacre in Taiwan also, which a lot of people don't know of. A lot of massacre by the Japanese on the Taiwan people. But during the 1937 massacre, I don't think Taiwan played a role.
Hi, my name is Rishi. I just had a question for Mr. Chang. How did you decide to restart your life after the fame of not being occurred?
Say that again.
How did he decide to restart his life?
OK，你怎么样决定你再做？这个其实是大家知道你怎么样再重新
是的，刚刚。
活的。Maybe I can answer. I'll what I meant. After the Second World War, his family moved to Taiwan. And then he was educated there. He worked as a journalist. 我说第二件事情，大家这样参加去台湾，什么教育、做事、做记者，在家，这样你后来大概。
我是当记者的
He worked as a newspaper reporter.
我是在这个《世界日报》。
In the World Journal newspaper, Chinese newspaper in the United States.
这个我有许多这个日本的朋友，他告诉我，他说元朝蒙古人占领中国200多年，清朝满洲人占领中国200年。他说我日本大和民族为什么不能够占据中国啊？我说好的，你要知道，占领一个国家不能够以利服人，要以德服人。我说你将平民来杀人的话，人家怎么会服你嘛？中国人很乖的，如果你好好待他的话，他会跟从你的。所以不管什么民族，你不要用一种强暴的力量，你要用一种道德对人好的这个方式，人家才会跟从。
My translation is not good, teacher, they can help me. He said a lot of his Japanese friends asked him, the Mongolians conquered China and controlled China for about yeah, and then the Manchuria, the Manchus controlled China for hundreds of years. Why can't the Japanese control China for hundreds of years? And he said, you cannot control a country like China by force. If you want to control China, you got to do the right things. Do the right things for the people, do moral things and so on, not just by military force. So Japan tried to conquer China by military force. The Chinese are not going to stand for that. They're going to fight you.
我告诉大家，希望日本政府不要抵赖这种事实，历史的事实不要抵赖。你干脆就承认好了，承认了我们就放弃了嘛，就大家没事了嘛，啊。
So his message to the Japanese government is that do not try to deny this part of history. Just admit it, then we can go on from there. And this past is past, and then we can build on what has happened. But until you recognize that part and apologize, the past will not be forgotten.
我今年95岁了，没有再活几年了，没有办法再向大家报告 我可以跟大家讲，把这个历史的事实啊，大家忘记掉，忘记掉了之后，大家有个新的开始，大家和和气气在一起啊，好好的把这个世界能够办得更好。
He said, I'm 95 years old. I'm not going to have much time to talk about this part of history anymore. So if the Japanese government would admit this and acknowledge and apologize, then the Chinese people and Japanese people can live peacefully and forget about what happened in the past and build on from there. But once it has to be recognized and apologized first, then you can forget about it. You cannot forget about if you are doing the first thing first. Next question.
My question is for Mr. Chen. You mentioned in the recorded testimony that you felt no animosity towards the Japanese following the incidents in Nanking. My question is, how did you get to that point exactly? How did you reach that point where you were able to feel no animosity?
Can you repeat the question again?
How did you get to the point where you were able to feel no animosity towards the Japanese despite what happened?
Hatred cannot solve problems.
做错了就要悔改。
When you did something wrong, then you have to admit and correct it.
每个人都会犯错，没有关系。
Everybody makes mistakes.
错了就承认吧。
Because everybody makes mistakes. It's not that important to make mistakes, but it's important that you admit it and try to.
因为日本政府到现在，他说南京大屠杀这个是中国的谎言。
Even up to now, the Japanese government is saying the Nanking massacre is a Chinese creation.
那我就分出来讲话，不是？
So then I have to come out and speak because I lived through that era.
事实胜于雄辩，事实胜于雄辩。
So many says it's the facts is better than or more than arguments.
我们人会犯错，人有两个，一边是善，一边是恶。你心里面存善，你就很好；你存恶的话，就成坏事。日本兵，我所见到的都是20几岁的乡下的孩子，很乖的。他为什么会杀人呢？因为武长就是他的排长啊，还有他的军曹，他的特务长，他们还有的就是翻译船。这个翻译很多是朝鲜人，也有台湾人，因为他给台湾人日本占领50年，训练的很多。现在台湾仍旧有日本的移民100多万人的后裔在台湾，所以台湾要独立。我告诉大家，如果日本人、日本政府、日本的人的很多承认南京大屠杀，他也到南京去南京大屠杀纪念馆去。
Let me translate. I'm getting old. If it keeps on going, I'm going to forget it. So before I forget, let me translate. He said everybody has a kind part, has a good part and a bad part. Okay. Now the Japanese, he has a lot of Japanese friends. A lot of them are good. He said during the Second World War, a lot of them, why did they do evil things? Because very often the commanders, the other soldiers, the leaders, and as said earlier, the Japanese government directly tells them to do the bad thing, so they do bad things. Now I already forgot what he said. They hold that Japanese.
果不是天皇下令的话，日本还不会投降。因为天皇的关系，所以日本现在能够维持到现在。我在日本兵里面，跟日本兵每天早上向东方跪下来拜天皇，他们叫天皇会啦万代，天皇陛下万岁，每天早上要向天皇磕头的啊。所以日本人对天皇是人间化的，所以和平了之后了，对天皇的制度人间保留到现在。
The Japanese people have a lot of respect for the emperor of Japan. They look up the emperor of Japan as a god. So when he was together with the Japanese construction leader, every morning he would lead him kneel down and say a prayer to the emperor. So so at that time, it's the emperor and the Japanese government direct him to control China, to free all policies. So very often the Japanese soldiers would carry out that policy.
因为现在还有许多日本人啊，他不服气，他说我们日本军队是穿皮鞋的，你们中国军队是穿草鞋的，我们没有打，我也不是输给你们中国人，我们是输给2个原子弹。
A lot of Japanese today still claim we did not really lose the war. We Japanese soldiers wear leather boots. You Chinese soldiers wear straw sandals. So we did not lose the war. The reason we lost the war is we lost the two atomic bombs.
We're going to现在很多要重新起来，他就是不服气，他要对中国人啊，他说我要再打一仗，把你们中国打。
So I think time is running out. He said that a lot of Japanese right now still think that we really did not lose the war, and there's a revival of Japanese militarism right now, and that we want to fight the Chinese again, and then we'll win the next war.
我希望日本放弃这种思想。
I hope that the Japanese will give up this kind of thinking. That's not going to help the Japanese or Chinese people.
中国人不会再欺负日本人。
The Chinese is not going to take advantage of Japanese, but the Chinese is not going to let the Chinese.
大家好好在一起。